The 9th hour of the assault. And I was still at the altar console. That is the part I returned to, when I tried to explain it to the younger keepers. Not the Keth breach in the lower ring. Not the fires that ate through the ceremonial corridor on deck 7. Not the bodies of my 2 junior keepers, who had gone to seal the secondary comms relay and had not returned. I returned to myself at the altar canto in the 9th hour, performing the Sacred Distress Rite with hands that would not stop shaking, wondering if any god was listening. The Aethori Concordance has 27 Covenant allies. We have maintained those alliances for 311 years. We have paid the tithe, hosted the delegations, kept the stations provisioned, and the frequencies clean. When we built Aethori as a sanctuary orbital, a place of record, a place of ceremony, deep archive of everything the Concordance has ever known, we inscribed the Covenant frequencies into the Altarcon's primary array, so that Keeper in Distress could broadcast to all 27 in a single transmission. It was not a military installation. It was a library. We had never expected to use the rite in earnest. I used it in earnest at hour 3. By hour 9 I had used it 6 times. The Keth Marauder Collective had come in strength. 11 ships, by the count I managed before the external sensor array failed. They had punched through the perimeter buoys, disabled the automated response beacons, and begun a systematic assault on Aethori's hull rings, starting with the lower docking tier. What they wanted was the archive. What they were willing to do to get it was clear. None of the 27 had answered. I do not say this with bitterness. I have examined myself for bitterness and found something quieter and harder, a flat accounting, a recognition. They had their own conflicts, their own calculus. Aethori was a library in deep orbit, 1 station, 312 Aethori souls. The math was not complicated, so I performed the rite again at hour 9. I placed my hands on the Altarcon's induction surface, smooth gray stone worn concave from 4 generations of keepers before me, and I sent the broadcast on the Covenant band. I did not speak to the 27 by name. I spoke past them. The rite's oldest language says, "Let those who hear carry the weight." I had always understood that as a formality. At hour 9, I meant it without qualification. Then the hull shuddered. Section 4 of the lower ring was breaching. The lights dropped to emergency amber. Somewhere below, something structural gave way, and the station made the sound that stations make when they are being opened against their will. I was still at the console when the proximity alert fired. 3 contacts, the system said. Transit exit bearing 271. Not a Covenant frequency, not a Council transponder. Human registration. I did not know what to feel. I knew the Terran species as an entry in the administrative record. A young species, a vigorous one, prone to what the Council classified as disproportionate response. They held no covenant with the Concordance. They had no treaty obligation to Aethori. They were 8 light months from their nearest settled system. The Altar Conto's comm panel lit. The transmission was short. The voice was flat, professional, carrying none of the ceremony I would have expected from any of the 27 had. They finally answered. It said, "Aethori, this is Tess Ardent Passage. We have your distress broadcast. We are engaging the Keth formation now. Keep your people away from the outer hull." Ardent Passage out. That was the whole of it. Then the viewport went white. I do not have a military mind. I have spent 31 years in record-keeping and ceremonial administration. I cannot accurately describe what the 3 human ships did to the Keth Marauder Collective in the following 40 minutes. I can tell you what I saw through the observation viewport on the station's upper ceremonial tier, where I moved to watch because I could not make myself stay at the console and do nothing. 2 of the human ships were long and lean. Fast attack frigates, I learned later, the kind built for close engagement work. The 3rd was heavier, broader across the bow, its running lights burning cool blue in the dark. They came in without formation ceremony, without the sweeping approach the Covenant militaries practice for display. They came in the way I have seen maintenance crews approach a failing relay, directly, efficiently, with the brisk professionalism of beings who have work to do and would prefer to finish it before the shift changes. The Keth had 11 ships. The humans had 3. I watched the Keth reform twice. I watched them attempt a pincer approach on the heavy cruiser and fail. I watched one of the lean frigates, cut inside the Keth formation at a speed my eye could barely track and come out the other side with 2 Keth ships, tumbling. I do not know enough about weapons to name what the humans used. I know only that the exchange was brief, and that it was not remotely close, and that the Keth, who had spent 9 hours methodically dismantling a library orbital staffed by administrators and record keepers, had clearly never encountered anything like the beings who had just arrived. In the 39th minute, the Keth withdrew. The heavy cruiser, T.S. Ardent Passage, the same ship that had hailed us, took up station-keeping position off the lower ring while the 2 frigates swept the perimeter. The comm panel lit again. Aethori Comm, Ardent Passage. Keth formation is broken off. We're reading a breach in your lower ring. Section 4. We have a medical and engineering team ready to come aboard if you'll open the bay. No charge your call. I stood there for a moment. I had no category for this. No protocol. The rite I had performed was designed for Covenant allies, beings who were owed the call, and who answered it out of formal obligation. There was a script for that. There was a procedure. You welcomed the Covenant ships, performed the acknowledgement rite, offered the formal thanks in the old language. There was no script for humans. I opened the bay. They came in 4, a medical officer and 3 engineers, and they moved through Aethori Comm with the same brisk efficiency as their ships. The medical officer found my junior keepers before I could direct her to them. One was dead. The other was alive, barely. Injuries I did not have the knowledge to treat. She treated them. She did not ask for translation or guidance. She had instruments, and she used them, and she spoke to her engineer in short, flat sentences that I only partially understood, and the keeper who was alive was stabilized within 12 minutes. The engineers went to Section 4. I followed them, because I did not know what else to do. The breach was worse than the sensors had reported. The Keth had been precise about what they damaged, and the senior engineer, a compact woman with close-cropped hair and the bearing of someone who had seen worse, surveyed it for 90 seconds and then began issuing tasks to her team in a tone that suggested the breach was an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. She sealed it in 40 minutes, the section held. I asked her, because someone had to, why they had come. The Covenant Band broadcast, I said. You were not on the Covenant Band's recipient list. You have no treaty with the Concordance. How did you receive the rite? She looked at me. She had the Terran expression I have since learned to recognize. Not quite a smile, not quite not a smile, she said. We monitor most of the active broadcast bands in this sector. Your rite hit our passive array. Captain figured something was going wrong for somebody. Seemed like the right call. Seemed like the right call. I thought of 6 transmissions sent over 9 hours. I thought of the 27 Covenant allies whose frequencies I knew by heart, whose obligations were inscribed in 300-year-old treaty language. I thought of the silence. Seemed like the right call. They stayed 4 hours in total. The medical officer left supplies and instructions for the keeper's ongoing care. The engineering team completed a secondary inspection of the hull ring and filed a damage report in our own administrative format, which no one had asked them to do. Before they reboarded, the captain of T's Ardent Passage came aboard personally, a tall man, gray at the temples, the measured movement of someone who had been in space a long time and had learned to conserve himself. He shook my hand in the Terran style. He said, "You should be all right now. File for a formal repair crew if the ring gives you trouble, and maybe get that archive backed up off station." Then he left. I returned to the altar canto. The Sacred Distress Rite has a closing protocol. You record the date, the nature of the distress, the parties who answered, and you write the formal acknowledgement in the old language. The one that dates back to before the First Covenant, before the 27, before the whole long architecture of alliance and obligations that the Concordance has spent 3 centuries building. There is a line in the closing protocol for the name of the Covenant ally who responded. I sat at the altar console for a long time. The station was quiet. The breach was sealed. My surviving keeper was sleeping under sedation, her breathing even, her injuries managed. The Keth were gone. Outside the viewport, the deep sector was dark and ordinary, and there was no sign that 3 human ships had ever been there at all. I filled in every field of the closing protocol: date, duration, nature of threat, outcome, casualties. When I reached the line for the responding party's name, I wrote, Terran vessel Tess Ardent Passage and crew. Not a Covenant ally, no treaty obligation. Arrived anyway, acted accordingly, then I sent the completed rite to the Concordance archive. I do not know if the gods received it. I do not know, honestly, if the gods received any of the 6 transmissions I sent over 9 hours. Shh. I have spent 31 years administering the ceremonial record of the Concordance, and in 31 years I have never had cause to examine what I actually believed about the Covenant frequencies, and where, precisely, they ended. I know where one of them ended. I know exactly what it found. That is enough of an answer for me.